my name is Brandon, and welcome to Metal Talk TV. I'm joined today with a special guest who I'm very excited to talk with. He is the former A&R executive who signed Metallica to Elektra Records. He has also worked with many other legendary artists, from White Zombie to Cyndi Lauper to the Misfits to Nina Simone and many, many more. His book, I Am Michael Alago, Breathing Music, Signing Metallica, Beating Death, is out now wherever books are sold. Michael, welcome to Metal Talk TV.
Oh, thank you so much, Brandon, for having me. I'm glad to be here.
It is a real pleasure to get to speak to you. Over the last 48 hours, I have binged as much of your book as possible, as much as my 8-month-old daughter allows me to.
Sure.
I have really enjoyed it. It's really well done. It's filled with great stories for a music lover like myself. And you really do not hold back for the reader. It really chronicles all your ups, all your downs. It's a really great read. I'm curious how this project came to be. Was the book something you were approached about doing? Was this something that was your brainchild?
The book came to be because this little company called Backbeat Books saw my film on Netflix called Who the F Is That Guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago. It's been on Netflix a little over 2 years now. They saw it, they liked it, and they wanted to know if I had more stories. So being in the music business professionally for 25 years, of course I had more stories. What do they think? So I said yes. And they said, let's do a book deal. So that's really how it came about. But I have a bit of a scatterbrain, and sometimes my attention ain't so good. So I don't know how I knew this, but from a very early age, I kept journals. And like at 14 and 15 years old, those journals were not like creative writing or poetry, but I just knew the list. Taking the B train from Brooklyn to the city, going to 3 nights of the Dead Boys and the Damned at CBGB. I mean, I just made these lists for so long. So I knew I didn't have the, what's the word? I wasn't going to be able to just focus and do this on my own. So I met up with an old friend of mine. Her name is Laura Davis Channon, and she helped me write the book. So we FaceTime for 2.5 years, and because she has problems getting out of the house and stuff. She has MS, and but she's marvelous. And so I just read and vomited everything out from my book, from my journals, excuse me, and she transcribed everything, and it went back and forth for a long time, and we just wanted to make sure that it really did sound like my voice. That was probably a long-winded answer, and I don't even know if I answered your question.
You absolutely did. And just
Fabulous.
as a side note, the documentary is great. I was able to see it a couple years ago when it was first released on Netflix, and it's really well done.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We made it on a shoestring budget when we went to Kickstarter and asked for money, and we got the money, and we made the film, and it's been so well received all over the world. It's been on Netflix now almost 3 years, since 2017, and this past year it's also on Amazon Prime Video, and it just continues to get great reviews, and people from all over the world, like even now, right now in 2020, said, oh, I'm just seeing your movie. Well, you know what? Better late than never.
Yeah, and perfect timing for the book. It's a great follow-up.
Absolutely, yes.
Speaking of your
book, the book
yeah,
came.
go
Sorry,
ahead.
just quickly. The book came out right before we got hit with this COVID-19,
Right.
which is a drag. But you know what? Thank God everybody can order the book. I Am Michael Alago on Amazon.com.
Absolutely. And
Sure.
like I said, I'm not just saying because you're on Metal Talk TV. It really is a great read. And if you're a fan of music, whether heavy metal or otherwise, I really recommend it. You
Oh,
mentioned
thank
in
you
your
so
book,
much.
one of the stories you tell is about your first concert. You went to see Alice Cooper on the Billion Dollar Babies tour at Madison Square Garden. Personally, I am a huge fan of classic Alice Cooper. I think to this day, he is still an underrated songwriter. Um, in addition to obviously the influence of theatricality Um, I'm just wondering, you mentioned in the book this how this concert changed your life. Can you elaborate a little bit on this? In what way was your life changed after this experience?
Sure. I was 13 years old, and my cousin Carol Ann was going out with a guy named Manny. We affectionately called him Manny the Greek from Astoria. He wanted to take her to see Alice Cooper. It was that time of the month for the gal, and she didn't want to go. So she said, you know, my cousin might want to go. I knew about Alice Cooper because I saw him on late night TV. I don't know if it was on Don Kirshner's In Concert or one of those TV specials that focused on music. And he had this pair of tickets. So I went to his office on Fifth Avenue. He worked in like an upper, like a really cool men's clothing store on Fifth Avenue. And it was June 3rd, 1973. And he took me to this concert. And I was thrilled. First of all, I'd never been in Madison Square Garden, which holds about 18,000 people. So for a 13-year-old, it was just out of this world. And, you know, everybody was dressed up and with high heels and top hats and, you know, Alice Cooper type mascara makeup. Yeah. And I'm just like this little petite kid from Brooklyn. And so we had really rotten seats. We had a brown ticket. Those brown seats were like $5 or $6. And I thought, even at a young age, I thought this is totally unacceptable. So I said, Manny, we have to keep going down as far as we could go. We didn't actually make it to the orchestra, but we got almost as far down as the floor. And we got two seats that just happened to be there. And I was just in awe. So you see Alice Cooper and you hear one of the great, now in retrospect, one of the greatest bands ever come out and do that song, Hello, Hooray. Yes. It's the last night of the tour. And I was in awe. You know, him in these leopard skin, high-heeled boots that were really cool, a top hat, a cane. At one point, he brought out that huge boa constrictor. And, you know, another time, as we all know, his head gets cut off by a guillotine. I mean, the lights would get great. The theatricality was amazing. And I just thought, oh, my God, I better get my tired butt to more concerts. I don't know if I said it like that, but I was so excited that I just wanted more, you know, and that more manifested itself because even at a young age, I knew about this newspaper called The Village Voice, which came out every week, and it focused on music, art, theater, pornography, and politics. I didn't care about politics, but I loved everything else it featured. So I saw that a year later, Alice was coming back for the Welcome to My Nightmare tour. I went to that. I saw that Lou Reed was going to be doing a taping, a live show at the Felt Forum, which back then was the small version of Madison Square Garden. I don't even know what the heck it's called these days because so many people have bought it time and time again. So, you know, I saw so many things back then. Todd Rundgren, my mind is not working right now. So, once I saw Alice Cooper, I just wanted to go to concerts. And I did my whole entire life.
Well, that was one of my favorite parts about the book, was just hearing, well, rather reading, not hearing, reading about all your experiences of being a teenager in New York City and just jumping from club to club and theater to theater and show to show and seeing all these now legendary artists. It's really phenomenal just the amount of talents that passed through the city or that made New York City its home.
Sure.
Who are some of your favorites you saw live during this time? Is there one or two that just really stand out to you to this day as just like, I cannot believe I was there?
Well, there were so many concerts because, you know, as a young person, I just wanted to go wherever the music was going to take me. So I would take the train from Brooklyn night after night. I don't know why my mom let me go, but I guess it was because I was doing well in school. And I always wound up at CBGB on the Bowery, or we would walk up the Bowery to Park Avenue South to 17th Street to Max's Kansas City. So it depends on the year that we're talking about. But in the early days, you know, there was the Cat Club on Wednesday nights. There was so many things going on just because it's New York City, you know.
Right.
So I was thrilled that in the early days, I practically lived at CBGB. Hilly Crystal, the owner, didn't card us young people, but he said, if I see you with liquor, off with their heads for 2 weeks. So of course we hid all the beers in the back alleyway. We chug them down, close the back door, and come back in as if nothing happened. So you know, the Dead Boys from Youngstown, Ohio, wound up being one of my favorite bands ever. The Energy, they were like the bastard child. Sid Bader's was like the bastard child of Iggy Pop. They were extraordinary. I got to see Eddie and the Hot Rods at CBGB, Patti Smith, the Ramones, Johnny Thunders. I mean, there was so many. It was just so exciting because
Yeah,
every night you could go somewhere, and
I
I
know.
did.
I I feel like that is really missing these days. It's just, the way it's structured is just very different.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Well, you know, back then there were so many clubs, bars, big and small, to go to. Here we are in 2020, and never mind that COVID-19 screwed us all up. I don't
Right.
mean to sound insensitive or anything, but it's ruined my summer. You know,
Yeah,
there's so many artists
I
that were
know.
going to pass through
Right.
here, and everything had to get canceled with good reason. You know, this virus is rampant. There's no cure or anything. A lot of people are not paying attention that they have to, when they go out into the world, they have to wear their face coverings.
Mm,
When I go to the grocery store or to the pharmacy, I wear gloves. I'm always sanitizing my hands and keeping everything clean because, you know, it spreads very easy and there is no end in sight right now,
I know.
unfortunately. But I'm sorry I went a little off topic there. So right now, or for the last few years, more and more bars and small clubs have just closed down just because they can't afford the rents anymore.
I know.
So it's been tough. People don't come through and tour in New York like they used to.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, people come through. You know, there are bars to go to in Bushwick and in Williamsburg and Brooklyn, but just things just aren't like they used to be, unfortunately. New York has
No.
gotten so homogenized
Yeah.
that it's a drag. But you know what? I still love New York, and I wouldn't leave it for the world. And I was lucky in my 25 years professionally as an A&R executive, I got to travel all over the world and hear and see music. I don't know why just now in my head. Uh, at some point, I was in London. It was pouring rain. I was really drunk, and somebody yelled out "Alago!" And I'm thinking, "Oh my God!" On top of being drunk, I'm hearing things now. So I turned around, and it was this concert promoter named John Curd, who I was friendly with, and I was saying, "Oh my God!" What are you doing? He said, "Come inside. I have a concert going on." And I was like, "What concert?" And he said, "The Dead Kennedys." And I was like, "Oh my God." Sold out, like 3,000 young punks in a venue. I found a seat up in the balcony and continue to drink beer with all these young people. And I have no idea why that just popped into my brain just now. Another great
Awesome.
concert.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of that from reading your book, which is makes it such a great, fascinating read. You're able to take your music fandom and your love of seeing live music and turn it into uh, a job and a very long career. Ultimately, you
Sure.
start booking at the Ritz
Mhm.
in New York City, and I not to give it away on here because I feel like people should buy the book and read about the.
Yes, me too.
But the Public Image Limited show, but that's worth the price of the book just for that. If you're not familiar with that story, of them playing the Ritz, all the booking of at the Ritz and around New York City. Now you get a job as A&R at Elektra Records.
So I guess I'm about 19 years old, and I was taking lunch one day, and I walked down East 11th Street just to go find some lunch. I see a beautiful Art Deco building, and there was a white piece of paper on the door, like an 8x10 piece of paper that said, I think it said Video Club opening. And I thought, Video Club opening? That's really interesting, because it's now the beginning of 1980. MTV has just reared its head. And so I walk into this building. It's a beautiful 1920s Art Deco building. It's a ballroom. And I just think to myself, I think I need a job. So there was a man in the balcony. It was like the Wizard of Oz. His name is Jerry Brandt. I had no idea that he worked in the William Morris Agency as a young person. He became an agent and brought the Rolling Stones to the United States. He worked with Sam Cooke, Muhammad Ali. He was incredible. He was an entrepreneur even at an early age, Jerry. He discovered Carly Simon, the Voices of East Harlem. And I had no idea when he said, "Kid, what do you want? We're not even open yet." I'm like, "Well, this is a beautiful building and you have a video club opening. Can I work here?" And he said, "Well, do you have a resume?" And I said, "Oh, I don't even know. No, I don't have a resume. I go to school." So he just said, "Come upstairs." So we start talking, and he liked that I knew about all forms of music, from the Great American Songbook from like the 30s and 40s up to what was happening in New York City, the New York City underground scene, the metal scene. And he said, "You know what? I like you, and I'm going to give you a job. You're going to open my mail, you're going to get my lunch, and you're going to answer my phone." And I thought, "Oh my God, I guess I'm in the music business." And that really, at 19 years old, that was the beginning of my life in the music business. Amazing. And I was a sponge, and I listened to every single thing Jerry said on the phone. And every day he was talking to booking agents. Right. So about a year in, I learned how to speak to booking agents and start helping him book the entertainment there. And the room holds about 1,600. So I was learning how to speak to agents. I was learning how to draw up contracts. And it was really a great, great thrill for me. You know, you asked me about Public Image Limited. Really quick, it's May of 1981, about a year into my job there. We have an evening with Bow Wow Wow. They were managed by Malcolm McLaren, and 2 nights sold out. He called me up. He said, "We're not coming." I said, "What do you mean you're not coming?" He said, "Well, Annabella is underage and her mom won't let her come to the States." I said, "Malcolm, you booked this gig 3 months ago and she was still underage. Just put her mom on the plane. We'll pay for it." He said, "Well, we're not coming." I said, "Well, send back the deposit." I don't think he ever sent back the deposit. I had to think quick. I knew Pill were in town on a press junket for their record Flowers of Romance. I had no idea what I was going to say to them. I managed to convince them to come down to my office that day. So me and Jerry and our publicist, Danny Fields, who was marvelous, friend of mine, 40 years now. You know, he discovered Iggy and the Stooges and the MC5 and the Ramones. He was our publicist. So we were sitting there with John Lydon, Jeanette, and Keith Levine, and their videographer, and we have to convince them to do this. We convinced them to do a gig. They didn't want to come out from behind this 30-foot screen that we had. So after about 18 minutes into the show of tapes of Flowers of Romance, John just starts taunting and teasing the audience. Chairs start flying from the balcony. Back then, they were still serving stuff in bottles. So bottles were flying, everybody. It was mayhem. Well, John and I kind of loved the whole thing, but you could read about it in my book. I am Michael Alago, breathing music, signing Metallica, beating death, and there's a whole story. It's historic. I mean, it happened in '81, and 39 years later, people still want to know about that event, and it was quite the event. And what that event produced was almost a 40-year friendship with John Lydon.
That's wonderful.
Yes. And again, I'm sorry I was long-winded.
No, I love the responses. It's funny when you think about how something so beautiful, right? Such a great friendship can start from such chaos.
Yeah. Well, chaos. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So now you get this job as A&R for Elektra Records, and I love in your book when you're like, I
Well,
don't
it's
know what
not
that means.
right. Well, it wasn't just as easy as that. But I was at the Ritz for 3 years. I was getting a
Yeah,
little antsy. I knew that there was more out there for me, and I was going out with a young man named Mitchell Krasnow. And I told Mitchell, you know what? I want to do something else. I don't know what that something else is. He said, well, my dad's name is Bob Krasnow. He is leaving Warner Brothers, and he's going to revamp Elektra. Excuse me. Elektra Records was in the crapper back then, and Bob was going to revive it. So I said to Jerry, my boss, I want to do more, and I hear that Bob Krasnow is going to revamp Elektra. Maybe I can work there. Jerry said, I don't want to lose you, but I know Krasnow, and I will tell him to meet with you. And then Bob Krasnow hears about me from his son. So he's hearing about me from
right.
two different people. I have an interview with Bob, and it's almost like that same interview I had with Jerry. We talked about music. We talked about all kinds of music. Bob had incredible artwork in the offices at Elektra Records. So we talked about art. And after that hour was over, we shook hands, and he says, I'll get back to you. About 2 weeks later, he said, you know what? I had that same conversation. He said, I like you, and I'm going to give you a job here at Elektra Records in our A&R department. I was on the phone. I said, oh, Bob, that's incredible. Thank you very much. He said, call our human resources department. They will set you up. Tell me who your lawyer is, and we'll get everything going. So I was just so excited that, wait, I'm going to work for a record company. So I called a friend of mine, and I said, well, Bob Krasnow is giving me an A&R job giving me a job in the A&R department, and I have no idea what A&R meant. They laughed in my face. And they said, well, Michael, it means artist and repertoire. In retrospect, here we are, many moons, many years later. And, A&R is the most important department at a record company. If you do not have great artists and you do not make great records, off with your head, you're out of a job.
Right.
So that's how that happened. And, for the next 25 years, I was an A&R executive. And it was incredible because I never had a plan B. I always had a plan A. And my plan A is I'm going to work in the music business. And with help from a lot of wonderful people and mentors, I got to do that.
Well, they say that if you have a plan B, you're not going to make it, right? Because then you have something to fall back on.
I don't know what they said. All I know about was a plan A.
Well, definitely more than work, though, for you.
Oh, yes, it did.
So
it nearly killed me too, but here we are.
So it's funny in a way that I get to talk to you today because just last week for the podcast that I host, it's a Metallica podcast called Metallicast.
Cool.
I was able to do an interview with John Zazula.
Uh-huh.
And so I feel like I got, the beginning of the Metallica story, and now it sort of continues with you here today.
Oh, sure.
Can you tell me how Metallica ended up on your radar and what your first impression of them was?
Well, there's a very long version in my book.
Buy it.
And buy it. But I tell this story all the time, but it's great. I was living in Brooklyn still. It was 1982. My friend Phil Cavano, who later would be in Monster Magnet, we went to see Metallica at Lemoore in Brooklyn, and we were completely blown away. We never heard anything like that before. And my idea then was to book them at the Ritz, because that's where I was still working. That didn't wind up happening for one reason or another. And fast forward, I'm now working at Elektra. And John Zazula from Megaforce Records and I become colleagues very early on. And he is fabulous. I can't even think of another word for John right now, but John, I love you. He has an independent label, and I work for a major. so I guess they were kind of looking for, you know, better distribution. And so he sent me a box of records. I listened to everything. But what really stuck out was Kill 'Em All by Metallica. He said to me, well, you know, I have this band that I think are going to be huge called Raven. And I said, okay. So he asked me if I would do demos with them. I think I gave them $5,000 and they came back with 5 songs. The songs were fantastic. They are great. We love Raven. But I heard Metallica and that completely blew me away. So we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. Am I going to just do these demos with Raven? Are we going to distribute Megaforce? It was just all talk, good conversation, everything up in the air. I had to do some business early on in '83 on the West Coast, and I knew Metallica were playing at the Stone in San Francisco. So I went to see them there. Again, they completely blew me away. These were young people, never mind young people, I was young too. If they were 21, I was 23. These were young people doing something that didn't sound like anything else that was out there. You know, they were pulling together British hard rock, American traditional hard rock, right. Speed, I would say even some punk to make this thing called Metallica. And, you know, never mind that when I saw them on stage again, I just thought, these people are wildly charismatic on the stage. And when you see them, your eye darted back and forth. And I thought, man, that James Hetfield is a ringleader. He knows how to whip a crowd into a frenzy. And I thought, that's how it's done. Came back home, still was mulling all this stuff over in my head. And I don't know, another 6 months goes by. Now it's the beginning of 1984. Lars called. I went backstage and said a quick hello to the guys. They didn't believe that I was an executive for a record company because I certainly didn't look like an executive. I probably had a ripped T-shirt and like jeans on, and my hair was long, like Farrah Fawcett long. Yeah, please, crazy. And I gave him my business card. So he called me at the beginning of '84 because I don't know if you're still interested in us, but we're going to be part of a Megaforce triple act bill at Roseland on West 52nd Street, August of 1984. I said, I absolutely am. So their days go by, my days go by. I let John know that I don't want to move forward with Raven, but you know, you could have those demos back. And when we had that conversation, John and I, it didn't go so well. But fast forward, as they say, money talks. So I really wanted them at Elektra. I felt that because I worked for a major label, I could take them to where they needed to go. So his business affairs talked to our business affairs, a deal was struck, and as they say, everybody lived happily ever after. But, you know, that night was groundbreaking. You know, that night at Roseland was crazy. And you know what? I'll read you a little something from the Metallica chapter from my book.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It was 1984. My friends and I arrived at Roseland and quickly made our way to the bar. I knew I was in for something earth-shattering. We ordered a few beers and met up with our chairman, Bob Krasnow, and Mike Bone, vice president of promotion at Elektra. I asked them to come and see Metallica with me because I knew I would ultimately need Bob's approval in order to get them signed. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. When Metallica finally hit the stage, the crowd went ballistic. Although Anthrax played a raucous first set and got a terrific response, ultimately the crowd wasn't there for them. They weren't there for Raven either. The crowd was waiting for Metallica to come on and destroy the place. At the start of the show, they smashed into the pounding lead of Phantom Lord with speed and brutal force, followed by the Four Horsemen, then the debut of the song, For Whom the Bell Tolls. The sound was raw, loud, and crushing. The music was more intricate than I had ever heard before. It broke down everything any of us knew about metal. There's a lot of fun and fantastic stories in here. And, you know, we talk about my 25 years as an A&R executive. We talk about addiction and recovery. We talked about, I had major health issues back in the day. I survived all of that. I've been clean and sober now 12 years. And so by the end of the book, It's all about gratitude. Gratitude for my life, gratitude that I wake up every day, and here we are.
Going back to the signing of Metallica for a brief moment,
Sure.
you know, this as the story goes, John Zazula initially wants to manage the band. He shops them to major labels. Nobody's interested. He decides to release the first album on his own. So,
That's
what's the
right.
change that happens between the majors not being interested and when you come along? Are you that change? Are you just the one that sees it when other people perhaps did not, or was the industry warming up to uh, Metallica and thrash metal and metal in
Oh,
general a little bit
absolutely
more?
not. None of those A&R people were as cool as I was. I was a young person that was out every single
Right.
night of the week. I knew what was happening in the metal underground. I loved hard rock and heavy metal. In Brooklyn, I lived 7 blocks from Lemoore. I was there all the time, whether it was to see Metallica, the Plasmatics, Wasp, whoever. I was always there. Nobody gave a crap about Metallica other than John Zazula and those kids in the underground metal scene.
Right.
Hold that. And at some point, you know, there was a confluence of things happening. John and I were talking, and he put out Kill 'Em All. And when he also at that point put out Ride the Lightning.
Yes.
We were in negotiations right at that point, and we signed them, and we also then put out Ride the Lightning. So it's 84. The deal is struck, and Metallica now on Elektra. And how extraordinary that is. That was a historic signing that really changed the face of hard rock and heavy metal. And now it made all those A&R people come out of their offices and want to find their own version of Metallica. Now, that doesn't happen. You know, there are lots of other great artists out there, but, you know, I found the best, you know. Thank you, John. Thank you, Megaforce. And I was there to take them to the next step and beyond. We were a major label with a lot of money, and we decided these are the guys. And, you know, it's funny. I always tell people at some point this little cassette came across my desk, too, which was their No Life Till Leather.
Yes.
So like I said, it was a confluence of things happening that I just knew they were going to wind up on Elektra.
When do you think it was the moment where everybody else on Elektra was like, all right, we have gold here?
I don't know if they thought that at first. Now, you have to remember, there was a marketing department, a publicity department, a promotion department, everything that makes up a record company. Now, a lot of those people, they were not like me going out every night of the week. As cool as Elektra Records was, I don't know if it was so cool that people loved Metallica at first. But I presented them to, I presented Metallica in a marketing meeting, and it was a requirement by our chairman that everyone go see them live or don't come to work tomorrow. It was one of those things. Yeah, that's how Bob talked to everybody. You're going to one of the shows in the tri-state area. If you don't go, don't come to work. Everybody went. Everybody, you know, everybody's in the music business for the same reason. We love music. Everybody saw what we had, and Metallica made a priority.
And like you said, it really changed the industry. And you have a chapter in your book about how you became that metal guy at Elektra, and you went on to work with several other metal bands like Metal Church, Flotsam and Jetsam, and Dawkins.
Sure. Dawkins were an established band. There was another A&R person who was working with them at Elektra. That person left the label, and they would just hand it over to me. And at that point in time, they knew they wanted to make a live recording. They had put out a bunch of records, either between Warner Brothers in Germany, and then they got signed to Elektra in the States. Maybe they already had 3 or 4 records out. I'm not quite sure. But they wanted to make a live record, and it was my job to get this done. And so we made this record called Beast from the East. And we were recording those shows in Japan. So we recorded the Osaka, Nagoya, and the Tokyo shows. We had a lot of fun doing it. I went on the road with them a week before because they were opening up for AC/DC, and I love Brian Johnson. So I was like, oh my God, I get to see AC/DC for like 5 nights before I traveled to Japan with Dokken. So yeah, and I think that's the name of that record, Beast from the East, right?
Yes,
Yeah, that's
correct.
right, exactly. Oof, my brain. Is that all you want to ask me about Dokken?
Pretty much, you pretty much answered the questions. I did have a more general question, I guess, and
Please.
maybe you sort of answered this already too. But for people who might not be familiar with how rec label works, when A&R does, what's the main difference between as an A&R man working with a new unestablished band like Metallica and a band that's been around the block a few times, and you're kind of coming in,
Sure.
after they're
Sometimes it's
established?
easy, sometimes it's not. When bands, artists, singer-songwriters got handed over to me who were established already, we now know that these people have their own point of view. They
Right.
know what they're doing. But, anytime an artist does go into the studio, whether they're new on the label or established, it is my job to make sure that the material is top-notch. You may be established, but you come to me and you have 10 songs and they ain't so good. We're not
Yeah.
going to the recording studio. Some people don't like to hear that. But, I really did get along with mostly all of my artists that I've worked with because I was a young person who really just loved music and I knew how to speak to artists.
So my question is, were you involved creatively at all during the Master Puppets era or any time after that with Metallica?
Sure, good question. Metallica never wanted anybody in the studio with them. They were very adamant about that. But again, I had to say, I need to hear the material.
Yeah.
You can't just, here we are spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Right.
and you can't just let an artist go in there. So how it was, they were managed now by Q Prime, and Bob Krasnow said, Michael, let them just make the record. But we do need to hear the material. So Lars was sending me cassettes of parts of songs. So I was hearing parts of the Master of Puppets album, and you could hear the development in the songwriting style from the first 2 albums to this. Yeah. So, I had no choice really. I had to let them do their thing. I trusted that they knew what they were doing. Even from the very first album, as raucous and crazy as Kill 'Em All is, they were very focused. And then you get, talk about a change in songwriting from Kill 'Em All to Ride the Lightning. Wow. And then you get Master of Puppets. Those first 3 albums are landmark. They are extraordinary.
Definitely.
So, I let them do their thing. They sent me mixes. I wound up mastering the record in New York City with George Marino, the late, great George Marino, God rest his soul. And when I got the acetates, the masters, I called Cliff Bernstein. He came to my office, and we played that record on 10. If there was a 12, we would have played it on 12. We loved what the guys handed over to us. Yeah. Like I said, these were young people that even when they were calling them Alcoholica back in the day, they were focused.
Yeah.
They were determined. They always knew what they wanted to do. They did what they wanted, and it was always correct.
Was Lars Ulrich your main contact in the band?
Yes, I most oh God, yeah, Motor Mouth. I love
that does
Lars.
not surprise me at all, and
no,
I don't even know him personally.
It's okay. Lars is fabulous. In the early days, whenever they were in New York, we would go out to like Trash Bar and just everywhere and literally get trashed.
Yeah.
I remember one night we were leaving Trash Bar and everyone was like, "Where's Lars?" in the middle of McDougal Street with his pants down, pissing in the middle of the street. I said, darling, you can't do that. Pull those pants up. I said that to him on his It's Electric podcast. I said, I don't remember that. I said, you're lucky that's the only thing I probably remember from back in the day. Anyway, Lars was my point person.
Yeah.
And because he was the voice. But I did interact with a lot of the other 3 band members, but it was really Lars.
Another band that you signed that I mentioned before, Flotsam and Jetsam.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, great band on their own, but obviously there's the Jason Newsted connection.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you signed the band after Jason was in Metallica, because he was with Flotsam for the first album and you got him for the second album. Was that correct?
It was very it was real tight. Because because I had heard Doomsday for the Deceiver. I think they had like a one-off with Brian Slagle at Metal Blade Records. Mm-hmm. Jason Newsted sent me that record with tons of press, and I thought, wow, more young people who are fantastic. So I signed them. I didn't get to make a record with Jason. We made No Place for Disgrace with Bill Matoyer, I believe. And so Bill and the band produced the album. And unfortunately, in Europe, in Sweden, Cliff Burton was killed. It was awful. I remember getting that phone call on an early morning Saturday, I think it was September 25th, from Cliff Bernstein. It really was the worst news I ever heard in my whole life. I cried a lot. Everybody was just numb. This was their brother. This was their bandmate. This was a very smart and talented young man. What an extraordinary musician. Gone in a flash. Anyway, so at first the guys, everybody's numb. We don't know what's happening. And I don't know, maybe 3 to 6 months later, Lars gives me a call and he says, we're going to move forward. We're going to move forward. We need a bass player. And funny enough, Brian Slagle and I both recommended Jason. I felt that he had that same fire and same energy and same look that, again, I didn't want to lose him in Flotsam, but they were a great band on their own. And so he went to audition and he got the job. And he stayed with them, I guess, about 15 years. Yeah. And, Jason really is an extraordinary young man. He is an extraordinary musician. We're still very, very close.
To kind of fast forward a bit in your career, you leave Elektra, and you go to Geffen Records, and one of your big signings there is a band called White Zombie.
Sure.
Reading your book, you make a reference to meeting Rob Zombie for the first time, and it seems like he was, from the moment you met him, he knew he was going to be a solo star and a filmmaker. Is that true?
Well, it's kind of like that. Yeah, I saw them at some little dingy hole in the wall, again, in the East Village. My friend Daniel Ray, producer, brought me to see them. He was shopping Raging Slab, Circus of Power, and White Zombie. Again, nobody wanted White Zombie. Circus of Power and Raging Slab wound up on RCA Records. I went to see them. They were playing in a little dank space in the corner in the back in the dark, as I always tell this story. It doesn't change because that's what happened. And they were playing loud. And there was sweat. And there was dreadlocks. And they didn't have one effing song. And I loved it. I loved the energy. I loved the noise. I just related to it. And I felt like we can make something out of this. So they finished playing. There's all this sweat all over the place. And I meet them all. And they're the loveliest people that I ever met. And I don't know, at some point, Robert and I are talking, and he says, I want to make movies, and we're going to be big. And I said, you know what? I think I believe you. So we did some demos, and from those demos, we signed a record deal. And we had Andy Wallace produce the record because we loved the sound of a previous Slayer record. And we thought that he could be that guy to make the record. And he did. So we made La Sexorcista, Devil Music Volume 1. And again, the rest is history. But, it took a minute to get there because at some point, the record stopped selling at like 180,000 units.
Yeah.
And in my next marketing meeting, everyone's like, Alago, you were telling us it's going to be a million seller.
Yeah.
So again, a confluence of things happened. Beavis and Butthead came into our lives. And that's all I'm going to tell you. As we know from there,
yes.
They became huge.
Yeah.
And there's a really fun story in my book, not only because it involves Beavis and Butthead, it involves famed filmmaker Russ Meyer, who made Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. We also called Vincent Price at some point to ask if he would do a speaking voice on there. So there's a really great chapter in the book on the making of and who all the characters were that were involved in the making of this, or not the characters who weren't involved in the making of this record.
I'd like to think that in 2020, the music industry and the heavy metal scene is pretty inclusive for the most part. But maybe not so much, I'm not sure, in the 1980s when you were signing Metallica and Metal Church. I'm curious as, metal is a genre that often gets associated with, white, straight, male, dominated. As a Puerto Rican, as a gay man, did you have a lot of prejudice, or
it's
no?
a funny thing. People ask me that all the time. I really didn't feel it. Here I was, a young gay Puerto Rican kid from Brooklyn, and I'm in the metal scene, but I was never in the closet. I never cared what you thought about me.
Yeah.
You're either going to like me or you're not going to like me. And, it's all about the music anyway. So, to be honest, I never really felt, people may have talked about me behind my back, but that's life, I always just felt, people are either going to like you or they're not going to like you, whoever you are. And I was determined to have people like me. And if they didn't, they could F off. So, here we are in 2020. And, of course, I think people have grown up and progressed and are inclusive. And again, if you're not, no problem here with me.
The one takeaway I had, not the one takeaway, but one of the takeaways I had from reading your book was just how you really just do not give an F. And I greatly admire that. And I say that not like you don't care, but I say that in a way where, whether it was, meeting a favorite musician backstage,
sure,
or how you seem to present yourself and in your confidence is just really admirable.
Thank you so much. But I guess we could also say in that I don't give an F. What all that is bravado. And I don't know how I had the bravado at an early age. I don't know how I had that confidence at an early age, but I did. And going along with that plan A, that bravado and confidence just worked in my favor for 25 years. And, in the movie that they made about me that's on Netflix called Who the F Is That Guy? Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago. And my newly released memoir, I Am Michael Alago, Breathing Music, Signing Metallica, Beating Death. I always tell the truth. When you tell the truth, people respond to that. And when you tell the truth, there's always some kind of story that goes along with the truth. So
Right.
I just felt that I was always that person. Like I said, I was always confident about who I was and am today. And I knew when I was getting this film made and when I was writing this book that just tell the truth. People respond to that so beautifully,
Absolutely.
and when you tell the truth, people then have more questions for you. And if my truth is a source of inspiration and for other people, well, then that's what I'm here for. I'm here to be kind. I'm here to service and help others. You know, when people say, "Do you give advice?" I don't give advice. I just tell you what worked and works for me. And if that can help you in your life, right on.
I think that is a beautiful way to conclude this. Michael, thank you so much for coming on Metal Talk TV. You've been so gracious with your time. Uh, the book, I Am Michael Alago, Breathing Music, Sign of Metallica, Beating Death, is
Yay!
available now. And
On
again,
Amazon.com.
Amazon.com. I
Yes,
highly recommend it. It
thank
is
you.
a fantastic read. I myself am about halfway through it, and I'm
All
looking
right.
forward to finishing it up as soon as my daughter gives me time
Oh, how
to.
beautiful. Well, good luck with your new 8-month-old daughter.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Michael, for
Oh,
your
thank
time.
you very much. Thank you everyone for having me. I hope you enjoyed it.